Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And I want you to look on my Facebook page. Be sure to see there the extremely sad news about my good friend Tom Mills and his family. Be sure to see that. And please keep Tom and his family in your prayers. Very, very sad situation. We are continuing our examination of the alliterative pattern of preaching, persecution, power, and parousia. That pattern is found in the Olivet Discourse in the so-called section that our futurist friends want to assign to the first century and the events leading up to the Lord's coming in AD 70. Pardon me. Well, the reality is that pattern is found throughout all of the New Testament epistles, virtually all of them. There's an exception or two. The book of Philemon doesn't have the pattern as far as I know. But in all of the major epistles, that pattern is to be found. Yesterday I shared with you that pattern from the book of Romans. Well, look at 1 Corinthians. You know, in 1 Corinthians, here's Paul, who has gone to Corinth preaching the gospel. His responsibility is to do what? Preach the gospel to all the nations. Romans 1, verse 5 and verse 8. So that's the very point of 1 Corinthians, is it not? The preaching of the gospel to all of the nations. Well, guess what? There in 1 Corinthians, this week has been absolutely awful. But as the gospel had been preached, and as the gospel was being preached, you look at 1 Corinthians 4, and you look at even 2 Corinthians 4, and in 1 Corinthians 4, and Paul talks about it. Let me read just a few of Paul's words in 1 Corinthians chapter 4. To the present hour, we both hunger and we thirst. We are poorly clothed, we are beaten, we are homeless. We labor, working with our own hands. Being reviled, we bless. Being persecuted, we endure. Being defamed, we entreat. We have been made as the filth of the world, the offscouring of all things until now. You see, Paul was preaching the gospel. He was being persecuted. And yet here he is writing to the Corinthians, and he rejoices that they come behind in no gift as they wait for the coming of the Lord. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 4 to 8. 1 Corinthians chapters 12 through 14, the most extended discussion of the miraculous power of the Holy Spirit in all of the New Testament. So here's Paul preaching persecution, power, and what is he doing? Number one, he expects the Corinthians to live until the day of the Lord. They're going to possess the gifts until the day of the Lord. You come behind in no gift, waiting for the coming of the Lord. He has confirmed you. He will continue to confirm you until the end, that you may be blameless in the day of the Lord. Pardon me. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Paul talks about the fact the fashion of this world is passing away. And he says the time has been shortened. Well, guess what, folks? Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24 that unless the days, those horrific days of that generation would be shortened, no flesh would be saved. And here's Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 saying the time has been shortened. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11, Paul says the end, the consummation, if you please, truly the goal of all the former ages has come upon us. He even assured the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 51, brethren, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep. That is to say, we will not all die before the resurrection. Everywhere you look in the book of Corinthians, you find this pattern: preaching, persecution, power, and parousia, and the parousia, the end, the resurrection, the end of the age, the judgment, is invariably at hand, coming soon. There's simply no denying this pattern. And when we see that the pattern, preaching, persecution, power, parousia, is in this so-called first section of the Olivet Discourse, and in reality there is no first section versus a second section. But when we see this pattern played out in epistle after epistle after epistle, let me ask, as I did in yesterday's video, what is the hermeneutic? What is the exegetical basis for saying, well, yes, they were preaching the gospel to all the world, first century. The first century saints were being persecuted as they preached the gospel, yes. They possessed the miraculous gifts of the Holy Spirit, yes. But the day of the Lord that Paul's talking about here is an end of time, earth-burning, cosmos-destroying event when every human being who's ever lived and died and decomposed will come out of the grave. Where is the hermeneutic? Where is the distinction that dichotomizes between the alliterative pattern in the Olivet Discourse and the exact, precise alliterative pattern in Romans or 1 Corinthians? Where is the distinction? You know what the answer is? There is no distinction. And that means that the day of the Lord, the end of the age, the resurrection, was to be at the fall of Jerusalem and the end of the Old Covenant age in AD 70. Hey, don't forget, I discuss all of that and more too in this book, Into All the World, Then Comes the End, along with this book showing that the end of the age, the coming of the Lord, the resurrection, was never expected to be at the end of material physical creation or the end of time or the so-called annihilation of the cosmos. Just is not a biblical view or doctrine. Regularly, the two books will cost you $41 if you purchase them separately and individually. For the month of August, the two-book special, delivered to your door, postpaid, total price, $30. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Look at the banner at the top. Just click on it and follow the directions there. Save yourself almost $11 on these two books that will help transform your views and your beliefs about the preaching of the gospel into all of the world before the end. Thanks for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. I will see you on the flip side.